Hi everybody, this is going to be the last in the series of the missed week, and so I'm going to talk about pivot tables, and I'm going to talk about text functions in the same video. Pivot tables, what you need to know essentially are that you are able to take a large amount of data, and I'm going to go over to the flat data, and if I just did a quick scroll down, I've got almost 49,000 rows of data to look at. And this is not the kind of data I would want to go through with some ifs, or some if, either of the two, or count if or count ifs, and try to figure out stuff, or average if, just to find different categories and things like that. I don't want to go through this whole thing manually. So the whole purpose of a pivot table is to summarize data. Okay. Long ago, we looked at a pivot table before, and pardon me, a pivot table is an easy way to kind of go around and filter data. I can actually go in and look at different areas or all of it. You can see how things change automatically. I can only look at a certain brand. There's a certain brand, and you can see how that's a much easier way of looking at everything. So we're going to learn how to make those, and actually making these is ridiculously easy. So let's take a look. We're going to go to data, and notice I'm just sitting in a cell here, so just pick a cell. And then what I'd like you to do is go to insert, and over on the left you see all these tables here. We were here for Excel tables, which is a little different way of looking at Excel data. Excel data, to remind you, an Excel table here just simply allows you to do a lot of fundamental things with it, like sorting and filtering and things like that. Pivot table, on the other hand, allows you to arrange and summarize data. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with a pivot table that you can't do with raw data. So we're going to click Pivot Table, and that will launch a dialog box that will guess what kind of data it is you want, or where your data is. And the reason I actually went down that far to show you how much data there was is to see if Excel actually picked the right one. Okay, so it did. I'm happy with that. And what we want to do is put this into an existing worksheet. I'm gonna pop out of the dialog and go find my sheet, which is Pivot Layout and A3, and I'm gonna stop right there and talk a little bit about why we put that in A3 and not A1. The pivot is constructed in such a way as to have filters, and a couple of the filters that occur above the table itself, and if you put your pivot table in A1, then you can't see the filters. So what you want to do is never put it in A1, and we're always going to show you on an exam where to put it, etc. Okay, pop back into my dialog. I just want to point out too that down here there is a data model option. We're going to talk about the data model, and we're going to talk about power pivots using a data model later, after you kind of get an idea of what a database does, because this is very similar to what they're trying to get Excel data act in a way that you act with a database. At this point, I'm going to click OK, and we're going to go to Pivot Layout. What you see here is a layout area, and notice that you're still highlighted on cell A3, and there is just this blank spot, and it could freak you out a little bit. If you clicked over here, you see all kinds of stuff disappearing, and don't let that freak you out. Just know that you just go over there and it's there again. Look up on the top of the ribbon. There is two different tabs for pivot table tools. One of them is a pivot table name, and we're going to tell you exactly what to name that in a moment. That's going to be important because that lets us programmatically find everything. And then we've got the design where we can do different things with it, including nice styles, which we'll do as well. But just familiarize yourself with what's here and check it out. We're going to do a slicer as well. You'll hear me kind of poo-poo the slicer because the slicer is, whoops, there goes my microphone. Because the slicer actually does the same thing as the filters, but it's just a little friendlier to use. To construct a pivot table, just like the one that you saw on the other sheet, we're going to do a few things over in that pivot table fields box. And just in case you were wondering, we've already skated over to page 112, about the middle, and it's asking us to add fields to the pivot table. So, a couple of areas. We've got 4 areas here. We've got the filters, so we're going to want location and brand. Just drag those down. Oops, sorry. Just click the box. It's changed since I last did this. We want the brand in the filters, and we want the location in the filter. Sorry. Alright. And then we want to take, notice how all this has disappeared. I don't care because I've got this going on over here. We're going to take sales as our values down here. Okay. And then we want category and department for columns. And if you look at the picture, you're just kind of saying, all right, what's going on here? Just take a look at how it looks on the picture and how it's got 2 different columns going on here, and we can do a lot of things with it. Just if you happen to decide that you want department, you got category on top of department, you could do that too. But just know that you can just move them around in here or just delete them completely. And then our row is going to be the transaction date. Okay. So that's as easy as it is to construct a pivot table. But you will probably notice that our pivot table looks very different from the one that we saw over here. So we're going to do some of that formatting stuff to it. So let's take a look. One of the things that you can see here is that if you've got, we had 48,000 rows, and right now it's aggregating by day. All right. That's awful. So what we want to do is reduce that a little bit by further grouping this. And to do that, we're going to go click just on one little cell, right click on it, and go to group. You can also go up here, by the way, to use the group there, but you know I'm a fan of right clicking. And I'm going to do both months and quarters. And then I'm going to click OK. And look at, we've got that. Okay. And look what else we can do. You can right click and choose to subtotal the quarters. And look what appears there. Okay. So remember that you can toggle that off and toggle it on, etc. Now just quickly right now you can go in here and start filtering things. That's no problem. But we're going to continue to clarify what's happening here. First of all, unformatted numbers are hard to read. So what we're going to do, since this is sales, we're going to change the format of this. And no, you're not going to go over and do it on the ribbon. We're going to do it here. So go down to, if you can see this, we're going to right click on any cell and go to value field settings. You should get a dialog for value field settings that shows you different things that you can do. You can choose, you may have noticed I didn't point it out, but we're already summing, that's the default, or if it's not something that can be summed, it'll default to counting. but you can come and change that here. But here's what I want to point out. The value field settings, notice it's value field, not that cell. I want to go over here to the number format, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to currency, and that applies to the field. No matter how big or small this pivot table is, that's what it applies to. Okay, and then okay. So therefore it always will default to this currency format no matter what. If I just do it by cells, it does it to the cells and not to the field. Alright. The other thing that I want to point out too is that you have these labels up here. And we're going to ask you to change labels here and there, and it's really, really simple. What we want to do is kind of say revenue. Make it clearer. So just go and type in that cell. And where it says column labels, we're going to put departments. Simple as that. And then where we say row labels, we're going to say, what are we going to say? Time period. Very easy. Okay. And then, and I lied to you, by the way, in the book it tells you to do accounting with 2 decimal places, but I did currency. Well, let's just as a little review, let's do it again. Value field settings, and we're just going to shoot over here and choose accounting just to follow the rules here. They are much better. It does make a difference, by the way, which you choose, so make sure that you follow the directions. We're going to go over and get rid of this ugly blue and gray, and we're going to go over to the design. We're going to go to styles. It asks you to choose that green color. Green's probably not my favorite color. So let's go find something else. But if you look down here, you can see many different groups. Darks, that's a little bit much. We've got medium and we've got light. So let's choose something happy. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this. Okay. All right. So this is pretty simple, right? Not very difficult to do at all. We need to name this as well, so remember we go over to Analyze, and it's called Pivot Table 1, and we need to call this Sales by DEPT. And that way it will grade correctly if we are grading this. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at a few of these different things. I'm going to look at perishables and other and frozen. And that's going to bring it down a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to maybe only look at a couple different quarters here. Get rid of all this extra stuff. Quarter 1 and quarter 2. Okay. So this greatly reduces things. And by the way, if you want to get rid of the pivot table fields, just know that you can toggle them here as well. Okay. Now, let's take a look at why we do this. The most important part. Constructing this is not difficult, but the most important part is to actually answer the questions. Before we do that, I'm just going to quickly show you a slicer. If we're clicked in the table, we go over to Analyze. It says Insert Slicer. Okay. So we've got brand and location. Let's do brand and location. There it is. And there it is. Okay. So once we do that, it actually puts in these easier to use, supposedly, slicers that allow you to only look at particular things. And we can look at particular brands. let's look at pet guard. That makes it nice and small. So anyway, you can have these slicers here that are a little bit easier to use for the user. Now, I'm going to bring this down because we're going to play with this a little bit. I'm going to remove all the filters and just select everything. And you can do the same, because I want this to be, darn it, I didn't remove it. There we go. I want this to be fully functional here, because we're going to go over here and look at analysis questions. And so one of the things you're going to need to do for the exam, and in fact you should do, you might even need to do this for our client. It'll be kind of a nice way for him to look at a large amount of data all at once. Remember, he talked about how he wanted to see things in historical data. That's what we're going to do for him. So think about using something like this, or the Power Pivot that we'll talk about later. Okay, the grand total for Allen brand sales in October. And we're going to ask you to come over here and type the correct answer. So, grand total for Allen brand. So if I go over here and I choose, let's see, Allen. And then I come over here and look at October. It's $60.72. Whenever we ask you to do this, please don't go over here and reference the cell. Like, we don't want you to type equals for obvious reasons. Once you change the pivot table, that changes. So you want to type it in. Okay. So that's basically what we want you to do, is go over and analyze what's happening by answering these questions. When you're done, it is extremely important that you remove the filters. Okay. So we probably won't have you do slicers on the exam, but if you have things changed, make sure you go in and you remove all of the filters, so that when we grade it, things are where we expect them to be. And that concludes pivot tables. But I also want to talk about text functions. I think we can squeeze those in here too. I'm going to show you a couple of different things that are going to be useful to you if you're cleaning data, which you will probably do a little bit for our client. Flash fill. It's a beautiful thing. Flash fill, so easy. We're going to do first name. All you want to do is type, start to type, and when you see it fill, hit enter, and it will fill all the way down. Isn't that lovely? It doesn't work great all the time, but it works a lot of the time. Enough of the time to make life wonderful. Okay? So, check it out. You can make some suggestions here. And, you know, undo it if you want to. So always pay attention to this, to the little options menus that come up. The next one is very, very similar, and I'm going over this because I use this a lot when flash fill isn't cutting it for me. And the way to use text to columns, this is on your data tab, text to columns. Control Shift down. I'm going to select all of the data that I want to translate or put into separate columns. Notice that I have delimiters. I have both a space and a comma. So let's take a look at how to do that. Here's the wizard. It determines, it says, well, what kind of file type do you have? And I've got two choices. One is delimited, which is the obvious choice, and then you can also do fixed width. If you do fixed width, you can basically put your separators in manually. We're not going to do that. That's not generally how we operate, so we're going to do delimited and click next. You can choose more than one delimiter. So let's say, oh, there's that comma, check it out. Oh, but I also have a space. And that kind of further cleans my data, but I'm going to uncheck space because I'm going to show you some functions that do the same thing. I'm going to click next. I don't want to make any changes right now, and so then what I'll do is I'll choose my destination, which is B4, and then click Finish. There it is. I don't know why it thinks there's data there. There isn't. But anyway, there is our stuff right there. So one of the things that I want you to know is that there is a function called clean and a function called trim. Clean gets rid of extra spaces, such as the one you see before Faye, which is going to give us a problem in a database situation. If I were to search for Faye, F-A-Y-E, I would get nothing, because literally the database will look for that exact string, and it doesn't have a space in it, so it's not going to return anything. But we can do that using clean. Sorry, trim. Wrong function. So if you look at what happens here, then I've got Faye looking good there. And if I do equal len, which we're going to look at next, if I look at len, which is the number of characters in a cell, I get 5 characters here, and it's very obvious that Faye only has 4. And if I actually go over here and make this len here, then that's 4. So we've actually gotten rid of the space. The other thing is, as you're importing data and working with data, you may find that you get data from a source that has unprintable characters. And that's what clean will take care of. And notice how I'm nesting them. So I'm going to do both jobs at the same time. That's going to get rid of anything that might be in there, like a tab character or a paragraph character or a space character, or not a space necessarily, but the character representation of it, carriage returns, things like that. So I'm going to use both, and I'm going to go ahead and do everything here. So there you go. That's clean and trim. And then if you ever want to do things with your text, you can do things with upper, lower, and proper. Proper will simply return something to proper case, which means first capital letter. There we go. And the rest lowercase. And again, you can do upper or lower. It's already upper, so let's do lower and see what that does. I use that a lot for usernames. Okay, so that's what that does. So those are things that, 2 things that you will not use on the exam, but you will use on the project. You'll probably use flash fill, and you'll probably use text functions, but not necessarily text to columns. Okay, let's move on to the text functions practice. And this is great because it's a lot like solving a puzzle. And so text functions come in 2 flavors, one of which returns actual letters, kind of like a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP returns data. A left or right will return characters from a cell. And you basically just have to tell it where the cell is and what you want, or how many characters you want returned. The other one returns a digit. It's kind of like match is when you do VLOOKUPs or index. The match will go and find a thing that you're telling it to look for and tell you the relative position of that thing inside of the string of letters that you've got, string of characters. So let's start over here with those. Sorry. Find. Find, there are 2 functions. One is case sensitive, one is not. Find is. And then search does the same thing, irregardless of case. But equals find. Find says find something, and so we're going to tell it what to find in quotes. And then we want to know where the space is in Wolfgang Mozart's name. Okay, what position is that in? I'm going to start by saying the full length of this string, including the space, is 15. Okay? Now we're going to define the space, and that's simply quote, space, quote, and then we're going to go and select that text. And we find out that it's in the 9th position. So there it is, 8 letters in Wolfgang, and that is in the 9th position. That particular item that we're looking for is in the 9th position. Well, in most names, that's a predictable character, so you want to keep that in mind. We want to use these in the most general way possible so that we can copy things and do operations to a number of different characters or strings in a column. The len function we just did, I'll do it again, equals len, and it will tell you how many characters there are. We know there's 15. Okay. Now those are the things that we're going to use because look here. We've got equals left, and we're going to start from the left, and we're going to return the left 3 characters. Okay. So my text is in A2, and all I'm going to do is type a 3, digit 3, okay? That's going to return the first 3 characters. Now keep in mind that I want you to also remember that you want this to work for anything. You want it definitely to work for whatever name that you type in there, okay? There we go, okay? I'm going to do the same thing with the right function. Note that the right function starts on the right with an equal sign. It starts on the right and moves to the left, where the left starts on the left and moves to the right. And we're going to find out the right 3 characters in the name. And that would be there. Okay? And we used to joke about how, you remember the thing a long time ago, maybe, where, you know, we had Brangelina and we combined a couple's names to make the couple name. Maybe this is how they did it. Not really. Okay, so you can see how this works. We have a 3, we have another 3, whoopsie, and so that kind of gives us a definite number of letters. Well, wait a minute, I want to copy this down a column, for example. That's not real handy because spaces occur in different places, characters occur in different places. So what we need to do is figure out a way to use these 4 things in order to determine a full string of text that we might need no matter what. Okay? So let's start here. How many characters are in my first name? Well, remember, I can go in there and use that find function. Sorry, it's been a long day already. Find the space, sorry. Should have rested between videos, sorry. Find the space in A2. And that tells me that Bruno has 6 characters. Well, no, it doesn't. Remember that we're finding the position of the space, but if we subtract that space from our answer, we get how many letters there are. And it's perfectly valid. Well, guess what? If we want to return the characters for our first name, we can use that. We can nest functions together to be able to return the name. So I'm going to start in with equals left because we're going to do the first name as it appears on the left. And then we're going to do A2. And then the number of characters becomes the find function. And so we're going to find the space as a regular occurring thing for most people's names in A2 minus 1. Notice I'm taking minus 1 from the entire function, not just part of it. And then there's Bruno. One way to check too is use the len function to figure out if you got the right answer. If you get that extra space in between, if you forget to subtract 1, you'll get it wrong. So be very careful. Now here's the fun part, the last name. Okay, characters. Well, how do we do that? Interesting. We've got the len function over here, which tells us all the letters. We've got how many characters are in your first name, which is 5. We can actually use that information with the right function to figure it out, to figure out how to return it, and then use both of these to figure out how many are in the last name. So if I do equals len, which is everything, minus find, in other words, from the left, I'm starting to find the space in A2. Then I get an answer. Okay? And in Mars, there truly is 4 letters. If we go back to Wolfgang, look at that. Okay, yes, there are 6 letters in Mozart. So in order to do a retrieval of your last name, your actual last name, I'm going to start on the right, and I'm going to say I'm looking for A2, how many characters, and that's going to be my len A2 minus find space, comma, and A2. There you go. And that just takes practice. You want to puzzle over it. A lot of people who like puzzles will like doing this. This is kind of fun that way. I want to talk about putting strings back together very quickly. You'll do this a lot as well. If you've separated things, or if you have separate things, it's often good to put them back together again. So one way to do that is to go in and say A2 and we want to put a space between those. There's our space, ampersand, not A2, A16, A15 and A16. There's Wolfgang Mozart. The other way is to use the concatenate function, which nobody can spell or say. And then you want to put in that, comma, then you want your space, comma, and then that. So either way works. Either way works. Okay? Now, on this sheet, this is going to be your practice. I want you to sit here and work on these. These are going to be on the exam. We're going to want you to, not these particular things, but things like this. We're going to want you to be able to do things like, perhaps, and let me just sit here on this. If we give you a telephone number, we may say, put it together in a formatted fashion using text functions. So here's what you would do. You could do something like equals concatenate, and then we could do a left parenthesis, and then we could do a left function where we're returning, that's F2, 3, and then the closing parenthesis, etc., etc. So, and then we could do, here's a function that is handy that we almost never talk about, mid. Okay, so we've got the area code, then we want maybe a space after that closing parenthesis, so I don't have to put that in separately, and then the mid function, and the mid function, you tell it where the data is, so F2. Where do you want it to start? So we want 1, 2, 3, 4. We want it to start in position 4 and return 3 characters. Okay, so that gives us our prefix, and then we want a hyphen, and then we want right, and this is so easy, right? Now that you don't have to do all the finds, we only want the right 4 characters. So that's going to be our formatted telephone number. It's not fair to use the telephone number format. You're going to have to use something like a text function. So get used to it. I'm going to let you do these for practice, and that is it for text functions. And this concludes everything that you missed last week in class. I'll let you know what's going to happen as far as completing everything else, as far as review and stuff like that, soon. Thank you.